6 months had passed since the disaster at the Threshold Gate. Valindra stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the great amphitheater of Central Station, her crystalline body projecting images and data onto the massive screens that surrounded her. Representatives from over 200 species watched in stunned silence as she presented evidence of what had transpired. The eternal question was destroyed with nearly all hands lost, she reported. Captain Charek and his crew sacrificed themselves to allow us time to reseal the gate. Their names should be remembered with honor. Despite the captain's initial errors in judgment, murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Vethkai delegation sat in uncomfortable silence, their compound eyes fixed on screens showing the wreckage of their flagship vessel. But the true revelation is not the gate itself or the creatures it contains. Valindra continued. The true revelation concerns the species we have dismissed as insignificant for centuries. She activated a new display showing the architects. Recorded message. The alien council members leaned forward as the ancient being spoke of humanity's creation and purpose. Humans were engineered by a civilization older than any of ours, Valindra declared. They were designed specifically to guard the Threshold Gate and to seal it if necessary. Their consciousness is literally the key that locks away the Varath. The human ambassador, a man named Dohan Seo, sat very still in his designated seat as Valindra spoke. He had received her preliminary report weeks ago and had spent sleepless nights processing its implications. One human woman, Una Park, gave her existence to reseal the gate, Valindra said. She remains there now, her consciousness merged with the ancient technology, holding back horrors that would consume us all if she ever weakened. She turned to face Dohan directly. Ambassador, I was asked by Una to deliver a message to humanity, she said. She wanted me to tell your people what you truly are and to ask you to be ready. Dohan rose slowly from his seat. Every eye in the vast chamber turned toward the human representative. I have read your full report. Historian Valindra, he said in a calm voice that carried to every corner of the amphitheater. I have studied the evidence, and I have shared it with the leaders of Earth and our colonies. He paused and looked around at the assembled species who had ignored humanity for so long. We always suspected we were meant for something greater, he said. Throughout our history, we have felt a calling we could not name, a purpose we could not identify. Our stories are filled with guardians and protectors, with heroes who sacrifice everything for others. His voice grew stronger as he continued. Now we understand why. It is not just culture or coincidence. It is encoded in our very being. The architects designed us to protect, to guard, to stand between the darkness and the light. He turned back to Valindra. Tell us what we must do, he said. Humanity accepts its purpose. The council chamber erupted in conversation as representatives debated what they had witnessed. Some expressed skepticism while others showed fear or wonder. But among the human delegates there was only quiet, determination. In the months that followed, everything changed. Humanity established a permanent presence at the Threshold Gate. Not the single lonely outpost that Una's family had maintained, but a full station crewed by trained volunteers. They came from every nation and colony. Young men and women who understood the duty they were accepting. They would live their lives in the shadow of the gate, watching for any sign of weakness in the seal, preparing for the day when new guardians would be needed. Valindra returned to her academic work, but with new purpose. She dedicated herself to translating every inscription in the Threshold Gate, building a complete record of the architects and their technology. She published her findings freely, ensuring that the truth about humanity's origins could never be suppressed or forgotten. Golthan returned to Marudan space, where he advocated for increased cooperation with humanity. His people had once dismissed humans as primitive and unimportant. Now Golthan traveled from world to world, telling the story of Unipark's sacrifice and the discovery of humanity's true nature. The galaxy slowly began to see humans differently. They were no longer the young species barely worth noticing. They were the guardians, the protectors, the living keys designed by ancient wisdom to stand against ultimate darkness. And at the threshold gate, Unipark continued her eternal vigil. Her consciousness had spread throughout the entire structure, touching every system and monitoring every seal. She could sense the Vorath pressing against the barriers, hungry and patient, waiting for any weakness they could exploit. But she could also sense something else on the station orbiting near the gate. Human minds burned bright against the void. Their thoughts and dreams and emotions reached her like distant music, reminding her of what she had been and what she still was in some fundamental way. Among them was a young girl named Minji Han, who had arrived with the latest rotation of trainees. Minji had studied every record of Yuna's family, learned every prayer and tradition they had passed down through generations. She stood at the observation window closest to the gate, looking at the massive structure that contained the consciousness of the woman who had saved the galaxy. "I know you can hear me," Minji whispered. "I came here to tell you that you are not forgotten. Your sacrifice will never be forgotten." Deep within the gate, something that was once Unipark felt those words and smiled in a way that had nothing to do with physical expression. "I know," she replied through the station speakers, startling the young girl. "I can feel all of you. Every human who comes here, every consciousness that burns with the light the architects gave us." Minji recovered from her surprise and stepped closer to the window. "The training masters say that one day the seal will weaken again," she said. "They say that when that time comes, new guardians will need to join you." "That is true," Yuna confirmed. "One consciousness can only hold for so long. Eventually, I will need others to share the burden. I want to be ready," Minji declared. "When that day comes, I want to be among those who join you." "You are young," Yuna observed. "You have your whole life ahead of you. Are you certain you want to dedicate it to this purpose?" Minji nodded firmly. "My whole life has been preparing for this," she said. "Ever since I learned about you and your family, I knew what I wanted to do. Being human means being a guardian. I cannot imagine a greater honor than standing beside you against the darkness." Yuna felt something she had not experienced since her transformation. Hope, not just for herself, but for her species and for the galaxy they had been designed to protect. "Then I will be waiting," Yuna said warmly. "When the time comes, I will welcome you and every guardian who follows. Together we will hold this gate for as long as the stars burn." Minji placed her hand against the cold glass of the observation window. Somehow, across the void, Yuna felt that touch and returned it with a pulse of warmth. Through the station systems outside the window, the threshold gate floated in eternal silence, its ancient surface now covered with new structures and lights from the human station. The darkness within remained imprisoned, held back by the will of one woman and the promise of generations to come. The galaxy had once dismissed humanity as insignificant, too primitive and too few to matter in the grand scheme of things. Now the truth was known. Humans had never been mere newcomers fumbling among the stars. They were the last guardians, created at the dawn of time for a purpose that transcended individual lives and civilizations. And they would stand against the darkness for as long as duty demanded, because that was what they were made for. That was what it meant to be human in the infinite void between stars, where ancient horrors dreamed of freedom and hunger. Humanity had found its purpose at last, and they would not fail. The light from the interface grew brighter as Yuna's body began to dissolve into pure energy. Valindra and Golfin watched in horrified awe as the human woman they had known transformed into something far greater and far more tragic. "The process is accelerating," Golthan said while monitoring his instruments. Neural patterns are spreading throughout the entire gate structure. Yuna's voice echoed through the chamber, no longer coming from her throat, but from the walls themselves. I can feel them, she said with wonder and terror mixing in her tone. The Vorath, they are so hungry, so empty. They have known nothing but darkness and starvation for 2 million years. Can you hold them? Valindra asked urgently. Yes, Yuna replied. They cannot pass through me. My consciousness is a barrier they cannot penetrate. Human minds are too full of light and noise and chaos for them to consume. The crack in the gate continued to narrow as Vorath that had not yet escaped fought desperately to push through before it sealed, but Yuna's expanding awareness pushed them back with the force of her human will outside the gate. The few Vorath that had already emerged began to weaken. Without the connection to their prison, the entities that had seemed invincible moments ago started to fade like shadows in sudden sunlight. They cannot survive long in normal space, Golthan realized. The gate must have been sustaining them somehow. The architects designed it that way, Valindra said as she read more inscriptions. The prison both contained them and kept them alive. Without it, they will eventually dissipate. One by one, the escaped Vorath vanished into nothingness. Their darkness finally extinguished after millions of years of existence. In the central chamber, Yuna's physical form was almost completely gone. Only a faint human outline remained within the glowing interface. A ghost of the woman who had sacrificed everything to protect the galaxy that had barely acknowledged her species existed. It is almost complete. Her voice echoed. The seal is reforming, stronger than before, because it carries my full consciousness rather than just a fragment. Valindra stepped closer to the interface. Is there anything we can do for you? She asked with genuine grief in her crystalline voice. Any comfort we can offer. Tell me about the stars, Yuna replied. In my training, I learned everything about the gate and the Vorath and my duty. But I rarely had time to simply look at the universe and appreciate its beauty. Golthan moved to stand beside Valindra. The stars are countless, he began. More than any mind could number, each one a furnace of creation burning across the void. There are nebulae that span light years, Valindra continued. Clouds of gas and dust where new stars are born. They glow with colors that have no names in any language. My people live in the great oceans of our homeworld, Golthan said. And at night we swim to the surface to watch the moons rise while the stars dance on the water. The Sorath believe that consciousness itself is a form of light, Valindra added. And that when we die, our awareness joins the cosmic background, becoming part of everything that exists. Yuna's fading form seemed to smile. That is a beautiful belief, she said. Perhaps it is even true. Perhaps in some way I will become part of the universe rather than trapped in this prison forever. The last traces of her body vanished into the interface, but her voice remained. Changed somehow, carrying harmonics that suggested vast distances and ancient technologies. The seal is complete, Yuna announced. I am the gate now, and the gate is me. I will hold this barrier for as long as my consciousness endures. How long will that be? Golthan asked. I do not know, Yuna admitted. The architects believed a single guardian could last several thousand years before their awareness faded. But they also believed multiple guardians would share the burden. I am alone, so I cannot promise anything. Valindra pressed her crystalline hand against the interface. You are not alone, she said. I will carry your message to humanity. I will tell them what you have done and what they must prepare for. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Thank you. Yuna's voice replied with warmth, despite its inhuman resonance. And Valindra, do not blame yourself for what happened. The Vethkai captain made his choices despite your objections. Speaking of the captain, Golthan interrupted. We should check if anyone survived aboard the Eternal Question. He activated his scanner and swept the area surrounding the gate. "I am detecting no life signs from the main vessel," he reported grimly. It appears Captain Churek's distraction succeeded. He drew all the escaped Vorath to himself and his remaining crew. "They bought us the time we needed," Valindra said quietly. "Without their sacrifice, we might not have reached the central chamber before more." Vorath emerged. The two survivors stood in silence for a moment, mourning those who had died because of arrogance and ignorance. Then Yuna's voice spoke again. "You need to leave now," she said. "My power over the gate is not yet stable. I might accidentally seal you inside if you remain too long. How do we get back?" Gulthan asked. A section of the wall opened to reveal a small vessel hidden in a chamber that had been invisible moments before. The architects prepared for this possibility. Yuna explained, "This shuttle will carry you to safety. It has been waiting here for 2 million years for exactly this moment." Valindra and Gulthan approached the ancient vessel with wonder. It was elegant in design, clearly meant for creatures of roughly humanoid shape. With controls that lit up as they entered, the navigation system is pre-programmed. Yuna's voice echoed from speakers within the shuttle. "It will take you to the nearest inhabited system." Valindra paused at the entrance and looked back at the glowing interface. "I do not want to leave you here alone," she said. "I am not alone," Yuna replied. "I have the stars to watch and the void to contemplate. I have the memories of my ancestors who trained me for this duty, and I have the hope that humanity will one day send others to share my vigil. I will make certain they do," Valindra vowed. "If it takes me the rest of my life, I will ensure that humanity learns the truth." "I know you will," Yuna said. "Now go, both of you. The galaxy needs to know what happened here." Gulthan sealed the shuttle hatch and activated the launch sequence. The ancient engines hummed to life with power that should have faded eons ago. As the shuttle rose from the central chamber and passed through tunnels that opened before it, Valindra watched the threshold gate shrink. In the viewport, somewhere within that massive structure, a human woman had given up her physical existence. To become an eternal guardian, she would never again feel the warmth of sunlight on her skin or taste food or embrace another living being. She would exist in endless isolation, holding back horrors that would devour everything if she ever weakened, and she had done it willingly, without hesitation, because it was what she had been created to do. Valindra finally understood why the Jimu the danger. Valindra finally understood why the Vel understood. Architects had chosen humanity for this purpose. It was not just their neural patterns or their genetic structure. It was their capacity for love so powerful that it could transcend death itself. It was their ability to find meaning in sacrifice and purpose in duty. It was the fundamental human need to protect others, even at the cost of everything they were. No other species in the galaxy possessed such traits in such abundance. Humanity had not been designed merely to guard the gate. They had been designed to embody the very concept of guardianship itself, and now the galaxy would learn what it had overlooked for so long. The youngest species among the stars was actually the oldest purpose made flesh. Humans were not primitive newcomers to be dismissed and ignored. They were the last guardians, created by beings who had seen the end of all things and chosen to plant seeds of hope against that darkness. As the shuttle emerged from the gate and oriented toward distant stars, Valindra began composing the message she would deliver to every government and species who would listen. The truth about humanity could no longer remain hidden. The universe needed to know. The first Vorath emerged through the crack in the threshold, gate-like shadow given terrible purpose. It had no true form that the eye could comprehend, shifting constantly between shapes that suggested claws and teeth and endless, consuming darkness. The creature moved toward the eternal question with speed that defied physics. crossing the vast distance in heartbeats. All weapons fire, Turek screamed into the communication system. Target that entity now. The ship's defense cannons roared to life, sending beams of concentrated energy toward the approaching horror. The weapons passed through the Vorath without effect, as if the creature existed somewhere between reality and nightmare. Then it reached. The hollow ship shuddered as the Vorath phased through the metal walls as easily as passing through fog. Screams erupted from the lower decks as crew members encountered the entity in the corridors. It is feeding, Golthan reported with terror, shaking his voice. The life signs of everyone it touches are simply vanishing. Valindra watched the sensor displays with crystalline tears forming on her face. We have made a terrible mistake, she said. The architect spoke true. These beings cannot be fought with weapons. More shadows began emerging from the widening crack in the gate. One Vorath had caused chaos, but now dozens were pouring through the opening. Charek stood frozen at his command post as the magnitude of his error became undeniable. I was wrong, he whispered. The human tried to warn us and I refused to listen. In the confusion, Yuna had broken free from her captors. She did not run toward the escape pods or try to find the weapon. Instead, she ran toward the nearest airlock. Valindra noticed her movement and followed despite the danger. Where are you going? The Sorath historian called out. The gate is the source of this horror. The gate is also the only solution. Yuna replied without slowing. The architects designed my kind to seal it. That is what I must do. She reached the airlock and began cycling it open. Valindra grabbed her arm with crystalline fingers that chimed like bells. You heard the recording, Valindra said urgently. Sealing the gate requires human consciousness to bond with it permanently. You will die. I will not die, Yuna corrected her. I will become part of the gate forever, unable to leave, unable to rest. But the seal will hold, and the Vorath will be imprisoned once more. The Sorath historian stared at this human woman who spoke of eternal sacrifice with such calm acceptance. Why? Valindra asked. Your species barely knows we exist. The galaxy has ignored humanity for centuries. Why would you give everything to save us? Yuna smiled sadly. Because that is what we were made for, she answered. My ancestors understood this truth and passed it down through generations. Humans were created to protect, to guard, to sacrifice ourselves for others if necessary. It is not just our purpose. It is our nature. She stepped into the airlock. I need to reach the gate's central chamber, she said. But I do not know where it is located. Valindra made her decision in that moment. I translated enough of the inscriptions to find it. She said, I will guide you there. The historian stepped into the airlock beside Yuna. You will likely die as well. Yuna warned her. Then I will die having done something meaningful, Valindra replied. After being part of the expedition that caused this disaster, it is the least I can do. They sealed the airlock and launched themselves toward the gate. Emergency suits behind them, the eternal question was being torn apart as Vorath swarmed through its corridors. Charek's voice came through. Valindra's communication unit to Valindra. Where are you going? He demanded. We are going to fix your mistake, she replied coldly. There was silence for a moment before the captain spoke again. I am sorry, he said. And for the first time his voice held genuine remorse. I was arrogant and foolish. I thought my knowledge made me superior to warnings I did not understand. Apologies will not bring back the dead. Valindra said. No, Charek agreed. But perhaps I can buy you time. The Vorath seemed drawn to concentrations of life energy. I will keep the remaining crew together and draw as many of them away from the gate as possible. Yuna's voice cut in. You understand you will not survive. I understand. Charek replied. It seems today is a day for learning lessons too late. Go now, seal the gate. Do not let my people's deaths be meaningless. The communication cut off as the eternal question began moving away from the gate. Engines flaring at maximum power. The surviving Vorath that had emerged turned to follow. Their hunger overwhelming any other instinct, Yuna and Valindra reached the outer surface of the threshold gate and found an entrance that had remained hidden to the expeditions. Scans. The architects designed this passage for humans, Valindra realized. That is why our sensors could not detect it. They entered into a corridor that stretched impossibly far into the structure's interior. The walls were covered in inscriptions that Valindra read as they moved. "The children will know the path," she translated. "The children will find the heart. The children will give themselves to eternal duty. My ancestors traveled this same corridor," Yuna said quietly. Every guardian who stood watch knew that someday they might need to walk this path. We trained for it, prepared ourselves mentally, accepted the sacrifice as part of our heritage. They passed chambers filled with stasis pods. Thousands upon thousands of them containing sleeping Vorath. So many, Valindra breathed. If all of these were to escape, the galaxy would be consumed within a generation. Yuna finished. Every living thing would be devoured. Every civilization reduced to empty ruins. This is what we guard against. This is why my family has watched the gate for longer than your species has existed. They reached a massive central chamber where a biological interface sat waiting on a raised platform. It looked almost like a throne carved from living tissue, covered in the same strange inscriptions that marked the walls. Gulthan's voice suddenly crackled through their communication units. "I escaped the ship before it was destroyed," he reported. "I am following your signal. Wait for me." Minutes later, the Marudan engineer joined them in the central chamber. His amphibian skin pale with fear, but his eyes determined. "I helped cause this disaster," he said. "I want to help fix it." Valindra was already studying the inscriptions around the interface. "The seal requires human consciousness to bond with the gate systems," she explained. "The human essentially becomes the lock itself, holding the door closed through sheer force of will. But the original seal failed," Gulthan observed. "After 2 million years, the consciousness that created it must have faded." "Yes," Valindra confirmed. "And I have found something else. The architects intended for multiple humans to share the burden. One consciousness alone can maintain the seal, but not forever." "How long?" Yuna asked. Valindra hesitated before answering. "Perhaps a few thousand years," she said. "Possibly less." Yuna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Then a few thousand years will have to be enough," she said. "Humanity will have time to learn the truth about our origins. Time to prepare more guardians for when the seal weakens again." She turned to Valindra. "I need you to carry a message back to my people," she said. "Tell them what we are. Tell them why we were created. Tell them to be ready." "I will," Valindra promised. "I will dedicate whatever remains of my life to spreading this truth." Yuna walked toward the interface and placed her hands on its surface. The ancient technology recognized her immediately and began to glow with soft light. "The Vorath are still emerging from the crack," Gulthan reported, watching his scanner. "You need to act quickly." Yuna sat in the throne-like structure and felt it begin to merge with her body. The sensation was beyond pain, beyond anything she had words to describe. Her consciousness expanded outward, touching the vast systems of the gate. Feeling the hunger of the Vorath pressing against the weakening barrier, she pushed back with everything she had with her love for the family who had raised her to accept this duty, with her anger at those who had ignored her warnings, with her hope for a future where humanity would fulfill its true purpose, with every emotion and memory and dream that made her human. And the Vorath recoiled. They fled back through the crack as her consciousness spread through the gate. Like fire through dry grass, the opening began to close. ancient mechanisms responding to her will as the seal reformed. The research vessel Eternal Question drifted through the emptiest region of known space, where no stars burned and no planets spun in there. Ancient Orbit's Captain Churek stood at the observation deck with his compound eyes fixed on the impossible structure that floated in the void. Before them, the threshold gate was massive beyond comprehension, a ring of dark metal that stretched wider than most moons, covered in symbols that no living species could read. "We have arrived at the coordinates," announced Golthan, the Marudan engineer whose amphibian skin glistened under the ship's lighting. "All systems are stable and ready for approach." Churek clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction, a gesture his species used to express pleasure. The Vethkai Scholarly Collective had spent 3 decades planning this expedition, and now they would finally unlock the secrets of the oldest structure in the galaxy, Valindra. The Sorath historian moved closer to the viewing screen, with her crystalline body catching the dim light and scattering it into rainbow patterns. Across the walls, the gate predates every known civilization by at least 2 million years, she said in her melodic voice. "Whatever species built this achieved technology we cannot even imagine." The 3 species aboard the Eternal Question represented the finest minds in the Galactic Collective. The Vethkai were renowned for their scientific achievements, the Marudan for their engineering brilliance, and the Sorath for their vast historical archives. Together, they believed nothing could stand against their combined knowledge. "Begin approach," Churek commanded. "Launch all sensor drones and start mapping the surface." The ship glided forward through the empty void, while dozens of small drones scattered in every direction toward the ancient gate. Data began streaming back immediately, filling screens with readings that made even the veteran scientists gasp in wonder. But then something unexpected appeared on the navigation display. "Captain," said the helmsman with confusion in his voice, "I am detecting another vessel near the gate. A small station of some kind." Churek turned sharply, his antennae twitching with surprise. "Impossible," he declared. "No civilization has claimed this region. Who would build a station in such a remote location?" The answer came into view as the Eternal Question rounded the curve of the massive gate. A tiny human outpost clung to an asteroid near the gate's edge, barely large enough to house a handful of people. Its design was old and worn, clearly maintained over many generations rather than recently constructed humans, Golthan said with a dismissive gurgle. What would such a young species be doing here? The humans had only been spacefaring for 3 centuries. A mere eye blink compared to the millions of years the older species had traveled among the stars. Most galactic powers considered them insignificant, too primitive and too few to matter in the grand scheme of things. "Hail them," Churek ordered. "We should inform them of our presence before we begin operations." The communication screen flickered to life, and a human face appeared before them. She was a woman with black hair pulled back from her face and dark eyes that held an intensity none of them expected. "I am Yuna Park," she said calmly, "Guardian of the Threshold. You should not be here." Churek made a sound that might have been laughter among his kind. "Guardian," he repeated. "What exactly are you guarding? And on whose authority?" Yuna's expression did not change as she responded. "My family has watched over this gate for generations beyond counting. We were here before your species achieved space travel. We will be here long after you leave." Valindra leaned forward with curiosity flickering through her crystalline form. "How is that possible?" she asked. "Human records show no colonial missions to this region." "We were not sent," Yuna replied. "We chose to come. We chose to stay. And we choose to warn every ship that arrives here with the same message." She paused, and her eyes seemed to look through the screen directly into each of them. "Do not attempt to open the gate," she said. "Turn your ship around and leave this place." What lies beyond is not meant to be disturbed. Charek's mandibles clicked together in annoyance. We have traveled too far and spent too many resources to turn back now, he declared. The collective has authorized this expedition. Your warnings mean nothing against the pursuit of knowledge. Then you are fools, Una said without anger. Only sadness. My ancestors left records of what sleeps behind that gate. They received visions from the builders themselves. The darkness within will consume everything if it is released. Golfin made a bubbling sound of dismissal. Visions, he scoffed. Superstition from a primitive species. We deal in science and evidence. Not fairy tales. Una reached somewhere, off-screen, and held up a tablet displaying text in a language none of them recognized. These records have been passed down through my bloodline since before your civilizations were born, she said. The language cannot be translated because it was never meant for your kind. Only for mine. Valindra recorded the symbols with fascination despite the dismissive attitudes of her colleagues. Something about them stirred a memory in her vast archives. Though she could not place it, we appreciate your concern, Charek said with false politeness, but we will proceed with our mission. You are welcome to observe from your station. He cut the communication channel before Una could respond. Ignore her, he told his crew. Begin full analysis of the gate surface. I want to know how it opens. The drones continued their work while the scientists studied every reading with growing excitement. Hours passed as data accumulated, painting a picture of technology so advanced it seemed almost magical. Nangolfin discovered something that changed everything, Captain. He called out with trembling voice. You need to see this. Charek hurried to the engineering station where Golfin pointed at a display showing the gate's energy signature. The internal power source is unlike anything in our databases, the Marudan explained. But there is a faint similarity to one thing we have recorded. What is it? Charek demanded. Golfin swallowed hard before answering. Human neural patterns, he said. The gate's energy signature contains elements that match human brain activity. Silence fell across the bridge as every crew member processed this information. Valindra spoke first with wonder in her voice. That would mean the builders of this gate, whoever they were, had some connection to humanity, she said. But humans evolved on Earth only a few 100,000 years ago. How could their neural patterns exist in a structure millions of years old? Charek stared at the readings with his scientific mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps we have misunderstood human origins, he said slowly. Perhaps they did not evolve naturally at all. On her small station near the gate, Una Park watched the alien vessel with sorrow in her heart. She had given her warning, as her mother had done and her grandmother before her going back through countless generations. None of them ever listened. They came with their science and their certainty and their hunger for knowledge, and they never believed until it was too late. She turned to look at the ancient text displayed on her walls, the words she had memorized as a child. The truth her bloodline had carried through the ages. Humanity had not been created by chance. They had been designed with purpose by beings older than the stars themselves, and that purpose would soon become terribly clear to everyone aboard the eternal question. Una closed her eyes and whispered the prayer her mother had taught her, the same prayer spoken by every guardian who had stood watch at this gate. May they find wisdom before they find death, she said softly, and may the sleepers remain sleeping for one more day. But deep within the threshold gate, something ancient stirred in its long slumber. It had felt the presence of the ships and the scanning drones. It had sensed the neural patterns it recognized, the patterns of the children created to be keys after 2 million years of darkness and hunger. The Vorath began to dream of freedom once more. 3 days had passed since the eternal question arrived at the threshold gate, and the research team had made discoveries that shook their understanding of galactic history. Valindra stood before the main display screen with her crystalline body pulsing with excited light as she presented her findings to Captain Charek and the senior staff. "I have managed to translate fragments of the inscriptions," she announced. "The language shares certain mathematical patterns with ancient Sorth texts, though it predates them by millions of years." "What do the inscriptions say?" Charek asked, with his antennae leaning forward in anticipation. Valindra gestured, and symbols appeared on the screen alongside her translation. "They speak of the seedlings," she read. "The children planted across the stars to grow in silence and forgotten purpose. They speak of the long sleep and the prisoners who dream of escape. And they warn of the reckoning that waits for those who open the forbidden's threshold." Golfin shifted uncomfortably at his station. "That sounds remarkably similar to what the human woman told us," he admitted. "Perhaps her warnings were not entirely superstition. Coincidence," Charek declared firmly. "Her ancestors probably found similar inscriptions and built mythology around them. Primitive species often do such things." But doubt had begun to creep into the captain's certainty, though he refused to show it to his crew. Meanwhile, Una Park had made a decision aboard her small station. If the aliens would not listen to words, perhaps they would listen to evidence. She transmitted a request to board the eternal question, and was surprised when Charek granted permission. An hour later, she stood in the ship's conference room with the three alien leaders studying her with mixtures of curiosity and condescension. "You wish to speak with us," Charek said. "We are busy with important work, so please be brief." Una placed an ancient device on the table, a recording unit that looked impossibly old, yet still functional. "This has been passed down through my family for over 10,000 generations," she said. "It contains a message from the first of our line to stand watch at this gate." Golthin examined the device with professional interest. "The technology is remarkable," he admitted. "Self-repairing systems and a power source I cannot identify. This is beyond anything humans should possess." "We did not build it," Una explained. "It was given to our ancestors by the ones who built the gate. The ones my family calls the architects." She activated the device, and a holographic figure appeared above the table. It was humanoid, but not quite human. Taller and thinner, with elongated features and eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. The figure spoke in a language none of them understood, but subtitles appeared below in the same mathematical symbols Valindra had been translating. "Children of our design," the message began. "If you receive this recording, then you have taken up the sacred duty we have prepared for your kind. The gate before you contains our greatest failure and our greatest shame." The alien leaders leaned forward as Valindra translated in real time. "We created the Vorath in our arrogance." The message continued. "We sought to build servants who could exist beyond the boundaries of normal space, but what we made was hunger given form. Beings of void and emptiness who fed on life itself." The holographic figure gestured, and images appeared showing dark shapes that seemed to devour light itself. "We could not destroy them," the architect explained. "They exist outside causality, beyond the reach of any weapon we could devise. So we built this prison to contain them, and we created you to guard the door." Una watched the aliens as understanding slowly dawned on their faces. Humanity was not an accident. The message declared, "You were designed and planted on a world where you would grow strong. Your consciousness was crafted to be everything the Vorath are not. Where they are empty, you are full. Where they consume, you create. Where they exist in cold silence, you burn with emotion and will." The figure's expression grew solemn. "The gate requires human consciousness to open," it said, "and human consciousness to seal. This is your purpose. This is why you exist. Guard the threshold well, children of the architects. For if the Vorath escape their prison, no force in the universe can stop them. The recording ended, and silence filled the conference room. Valendra was the first to speak. "This changes everything," she said with awe in her voice. "If this recording is genuine, then humanity is not a young species at all. They are the inheritors of the architects themselves." Churek's mandibles worked silently as he processed what he had witnessed. "We need to verify this," he said finally. "We need more evidence before we abandon our mission." "What more evidence do you require?" Yuna asked with frustration creeping into her voice. "The inscriptions match the recording. The gate responds to human neural patterns. How many warnings must you receive before you listen? The collective sent us to unlock the secrets of this gate." Churek replied stubbornly. "We've invested too much to simply turn away because of ancient recordings and cryptic messages." Golfin cleared his throat awkwardly. "Captain, there is something else you should know," he said. "While conducting my analysis of the gate's opening mechanism, I discovered it requires biological material from a compatible species." "Compatible species?" Churek repeated. "What does that mean?" "I tested samples from all 3 of our species," Golfin explained. "None of them triggered any response from the gate. But when I tested a sample of human DNA from our medical database," he paused and glanced at Yuna apologetically. "We took a small sample during your health screening when you boarded," he admitted. "Standard procedure for all visitors." Yuna's face went pale. "What happened when you tested it?" She asked, though she already knew the answer. "The gate began to activate," Golfin said quietly. "For the first time in 2 million years. Its systems recognized compatible genetic material." Churek stood abruptly with excitement, overcoming his earlier doubts. "This is exactly what we hoped for," he declared. "We have found the key to opening the greatest mystery in the galaxy." "You cannot," Yuna said with desperation in her voice. "The recording explained what lies beyond. You would doom us all." "Superstition and fear," Churek dismissed. "Whatever the architects imprisoned may have seemed terrible to them. But our technology has advanced beyond anything they could imagine. We can handle whatever we find." He turned to Golfin. "Use the human sample to interface with the gate," he commanded. "Begin the opening sequence." "No." Yuna shouted and lunged toward the engineering console to Vethkai. Security officers grabbed her arms and held her back despite her struggles. "I am sorry," Golfin said as he prepared the interface. "Truly I am. But orders are orders." Valendra watched with growing horror as the Marudan engineer activated the sequence. "Captain, I must protest," she said. "The evidence suggests we are making a terrible mistake." "Noted and overruled," Churek replied coldly. "History will remember this day as the moment we unlocked the secrets of the ancients." On the view screen, the threshold gate began to glow with energy that had lain dormant for 2 million years. The massive ring trembled as ancient mechanisms awakened. From their long sleep, Yuna stopped struggling and watched with tears streaming down her face. "You have killed us all," she whispered. "You have killed everyone." A crack appeared in the center of the gate, a line of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow the starlight around it, and from that darkness came a sound that penetrated the hull of the ship and resonated in the minds of every being aboard. It was not a voice and not quite a scream. It was hunger given form. Reaching out, after 2 million years of starvation, the Vorath had awakened and they were so very hungry.